and I am in this video. So this is the Model G of NeFx, Enfp. As you can see, top row is externalities, and the bottom row is internalities. Now, this has been simplified to this. So, as you can see, valued functions are in green. This is the same as the MBTI 4-function model. Now, MBTI actually does have an 8-function model. It's the same as the BEAD model, but it's not really discussed on YouTube. So, externalities row. So this model was created by Dr. Victor Gulenko, and this idea of all of the functions in the externalities row that are directed towards society being of the same vertness. This is something that Dario Nardi mentioned in the back of his book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership, and these were the results of his research. And he mentioned that introverts overall will report moderate comfort with all of their introverted functions. Right then, so as you can see here, social mission, these are the two working together. So how can I prove how important FE is? Think of the Keirsey name for the ENFP, the champion, meaning the advocator, someone who advocates the things. So you may have noticed that ENFP resemblers are somewhat expressive. FE being in Socionics, ethics of emotions. So that is the ability to read emotions in other people. And when it's as strong as this, it's also the ability to change emotions in other people. And so ENFPs, or rather the people who resemble them, are very expressive people. Their faces, there's a lot of expression coming across. So any with the FE. That's the theory. Dario Nardi would say that this function is developed. I was going to say developed with development, but so with development comes an increase with that function. So this is why I call it NeFx, because Victor would call this type, well, actually he would call it I.E., because he uses the Gulenko function, but I would call it, and that would equate to NeFe, but I'm like, no, I want to sit on the fence and say NeFx, because both are used depending on the mode. So one of the things that's in the Keirsey profile is that the ENFP can get caught between wanting acceptance and approval from others. I should use this pen, the FE part, and authenticity, the FI part. So the idea here is a social mission. Maximum energy for these functions, optimum energy for these. So the psyche, people tend to overindulge their two favorite functions, the lead function and their auxiliary function. So within the social mission, when it's like directed towards us, if you have a problem when you cannot use these two, then ENFP will go to these two. So this one here, this is the role function, and this is the same mindset as the first one. The mindset of ENFP is EP, flexible, active. And you may have noticed that they have a very strong desire for independence, and that with them it can be like herding cats. So that is sort of like your physical proof of what it's like having that extroverted sense in them. If you try to impose your willpower on them, they will fight back. they have quite a bit of, they don't come across as wimps, say, compared to INTP and INFP. And I can say that because I was INTP. So there can be quite something, it's that flexible, active temperament. And when they're under pressure, when I suppose it's more of a pressure of a changing situation where they can be energized by it. So this is quite like the SE DOMs. Not quite as good as the SE DOMs, but under pressure they can be good. So again, the E and the P. And I've asked ENFP resemblers about, is this strength of functioning right for them? Now, TE, they like the idea of TE, but when it comes down to it, it's difficult for them to do. The idea here is a little bit of a strange situation where they have very low energy for it, but they're very sensitive to it. Now, I know 3 ENFP resemblers who run a business, and that's not an easy thing in the United States. So, but I think in all 3 cases, these businesses involve people to a large degree. So it's still going to be their design. It's going to be other functions are going to come into play, other things that they like, dealing with people. You can think of Carol Linden, who she has the website effectivewithpeople.com. A lot of that is dealing with people. Or say someone might be a realtor, or someone might run other kind of business. I've forgotten what the other one does. And in this business environment, if they are sufficiently stimulated, because remember, EP, if they are sufficiently interested, a weird thing can happen called the beneficiary shift, which is when this function here, TE, it starts and it goes T to any, and it's when an ENFP can for a short while shift to acting a bit like an ENTJ. That sounds remarkable, but it does happen. So the internalities row, this is at close range. Now, I know what I'm like at close range. I've been told by Maria that I act like an ENFP in Hangouts when I'm at close range on my territory, talking about this stuff or talking about economics. So I've been thinking, well, what does it look like when ENFP is on their territory? So theoretically, they should act a bit like ISFP or ESI, which is a slightly different type. ESI is like a hardcore moral guardian, such as Mary Whitehouse. You have to look her up. So it's not quite the same as ISFP. So ISFP, I mean, I would think on their territory, it's, remember I said before, is they can have that problem with authenticity and wanting to be approved by the approval of other people. I actually think it's best for them to be authentic. And I suppose they're authentic and they're healthy. ISFP, I could imagine that it would be when they're on their territory, they can go to the mode of being like creative, like an ISFP, the composer. It's difficult to know what that one looks like, but it is a thing in INTP that they act like ENFP. So we've done the social adaptation, but oh yeah, this is the thing. You put an ENFP under pressure, they can act like SETE, and that is the social mission block of ESTP. It is in all of the profiles. You read it in the Keirsey profiles. Fiercely independent. They will come back at anyone who tries to repress their independence. These are the 2 weakest functions in ENFP. I will just go over some of the functions. So any intuition of ideas, opportunities, alternatives. I've explained deficits emotions. SE, power sensing, volition sensing, or we can use it in Dario Nardi terms, immersing yourself in the present context. There is some overlap between also relates to the tactical intelligence of David Keirsey. So tactical intelligence, think of a sporting situation where it's very good at achieving short-term objectives and reacting to changes in the moment. Again, it's all of this EP mindset, flexible, active. The overlap with the NADI, with the socionics, power sensing, is Dario wrote that the highest development of extroverted sensing is spurring action and getting results simply by making your presence felt. So it probably means intimidating people. TE, business logic, practical thinking. FI. Now, in socionics, FI is ethics of relations. And what that is rapport. It judges connection. It judges psychological distance based on a feeling of connection with somebody. And that can be over many things. I would suggest that in the NFPs compared to the SSPs, that then there will be more of a connection over values. So it's very subjective in this judgment of interpersonal distance based on connection. It's what the connection that they think they have. So for instance, you could have the way FI works, you could have somebody meet a celebrity. They're a huge fan of the celebrity, and they feel that connection. But there's nothing actually there that it's coming off because the celebrity doesn't know them. They're going off their own feeling for it. So that is the danger of any process which is subjective, is you get that nuance. So it's how well it's used. So PI, NI. This is a tricky one for ENFP. You can see it in ESFP quite easily. They're not into theories. They want the hands-on practical learning. But ENFPs are abstract. So it's not TI break in the same way. So for them, you have to sort of think of it as they're not very good at, I mean, the profile will say following detailed instructions, that kind of TI. I know that sounds like Western SI, but I suppose it's also coming up with their own structures and systems. Now, a lot of the times when they might need, when the situation calls for, say, TI in it, analyzing it, using the logic, they can pretty much use the NE on that, because really NE is a logical process because it's transcontextual thinking. So they can pretty much use the NE as a workaround. But yes, in terms of creating and designing a detailed structure and creating your own process, that is difficult for them. And also, a lot of times they don't necessarily need to do that because they've got the TE there. So it's not quite that thing. But the actual profiles will say things like they're not very good at detailed paperwork and accounts and things like that. NI. This has very low energy for NI and very high information. Why is that? Because it's the opposite of the NE. NE is about going for lots of different opportunities and doing the thing in the moment where it's bringing forth. So it's out there, it's active, it's taking opportunities. You see how active they are. NI is in your head and it's focusing on one thing. It's basically, I used to call it intuition of change, but that got a little bit confusing. And Victor suggested that wasn't a good name. So I will call it intuition of development. They know how things are going to change. But if you go into NI mode, you can't do the NE thing. Because in NI mode, you're more of a it's more like downtime and through time, some NLP concepts. Downtime where you're going into yourself rather than outwards. sort of daydreaming states, trance states, through time rather than being right in the moment, going through it. Whereas NE is quite in the moment, but it's taking the opportunities in the moment. So it sort of gets repressed, and they don't want to do the NI thing because it goes against the EP thing. If you think of the EP thing like Enneagram 7, wants lots of options, the NI narrows the options down. So, but because it's high in information, they can tell other people how they see the trends going, but they're not going to do it themselves. So this is sort of like the will talk the talk but doesn't walk the walk function. And this is the same with TE and INTPs. Right then, so that is the end. So links in video notes, and they'll be on the end cards as well, which will be coming up now.